I hated dance clubs, they were too loud, too dark and way too full of people. The only reason I had come to this one was to find my girlfriend. Kimberly and I had gotten into a fight a few hours ago which led her to storming out of the house and coming here. She had always been the more social out of the two of us, she liked to party, she had many friends with whom she spent a lot of time hanging out, and she loved to dance. But, when we met in college I learned that opposites attract, and despite our social differences, with me being much more reserved and introverted, we did get along well. I would, on occasion, go out with her when she wanted me to, and typically I had no issue with her going out with her friends. At least I had no issues until earlier tonight. Kimberly had told me that she had been invited out, but it wasn't by her usual group of friends, and instead, it was an old acquaintance from high school. A male acquaintance named Dalton. Now I'm not the jealous type and I don't have any issue with her having platonic friends who are men. But this was weird. According to her, she had never really spoken to him in high school and it had been well over 10 years since the two had seen each other. Despite this though, she couldn't understand why I was confused, why I couldn't understand her reasoning for wanting to go see him, and why I was growing frustrated with her. Things boiled up and ultimately I told her I wasn't comfortable with her seeing him. That was a mistake. It led to her leaving angrily as I sat on the couch stewing in my own frustration with the scenario. Eventually, I cooled off. I felt bad for the way things had gone and I wanted to make them right. Maybe Dalton was a good guy, maybe I was being too antisocial, and maybe I should have given him a chance. I waited in line at the club, it was busy and I prayed they were still letting guys in. Once in the loud dimly lit club I scoped out the area and saw Kimberly sitting on a couch alone. I knew she liked to dress up when she went out, but she really could have chosen a less revealing dress. Had she worn that when she left the house? It was a short black strapless dress that hugged her B-cup breasts tightly in a way that amplified her cleavage and made her chest look larger. Otherwise, she was as I remembered, her short dirty blonde pixie cut, her cute round face, her large blue eyes, the small freckles that adorned her cheeks and her fit body squeezed into that black dress. I made my way toward her through the crowds of people and made my way towards her. She saw me as I approached her and gave me an excited wave before I got close enough to hear her over the thumping music. "Oh my God," she shouted excitedly with a bounce that really put her dress's ability to hold her breasts to the test. As I got closer to the couch, "Dalton and I were just talking about you, Chuck." "What are the odds?" she asked in a giggly tipsy voice. God, she was cute. I sat down next to her before speaking. "I feel really bad about how we left things. I think I was being a bit of a dummy earlier with how I acted," I said once I sat down. Kimberly cocked her head and gave me a confused smile. "You know, with how I acted in the apartment when you said you were going out to meet Dalton," I elaborated. Kimberly still looked confused as she let out a giggle. "When were you over at our apartment?" she asked quizzically. I furrowed my brow. Kimberly had, obviously, had a bit too much to drink, but she was acting far stranger than any other time I had seen her intoxicated. I wondered if maybe this Dalton wasn't as great of a guy as initially assumed and had perhaps spiked her drink. Before I could say anything else, we were interrupted by a voice that came from behind me. "Charlie," the unfamiliar masculine voice exclaimed. "You're back!" Kimberly exclaimed excitedly. I turned to face a man I had never seen. He seemed shorter at around 5 feet 8 inches and maybe even shorter than Kimberly's 5 feet 6 inches. He was thin and in a very brightly colored blue dress shirt and black pants. His black hair was slicked back with way too much hair gel and he reeked of some kind of strong cologne. In one hand he held a beer and in the other a cocktail glass. I wasn't one to judge, but this man seemed like the definition of the guy who was trying too hard. If this was Dalton, I suddenly felt at ease. I would tower over him at 6 feet 4 inches. I kept in decent shape with daily jogs, and although I wasn't the most stylish of men, I had a good idea of how to dress. If he had spiked Kimberly's drink, I didn't have to worry about fighting him off. "I actually prefer Chuck," I said bluntly. You must be Dalton, I added. Dalton didn't answer me and instead walked past me as he said, "Actually, people call you Charlie," he stated matter-of-factly before continuing. "Scoot over so I can sit next to my girl." Kimberly giggled and I felt my frustration return. Something was very wrong with my girlfriend. "Hey, listen, I really don't appreciate you talking like that," I said as I slid over and gave Dalton space to sit next to Kimberly. "Why did I move?" Dalton passed Kimberly the cocktail glass as he sat down and she kissed him on the cheek once he was seated. "Kimberly!" I exclaimed in shock. Dalton gave me a slight grin. "And why exactly don't you appreciate me talking like that to Kimberly?" he asked in an almost mocking tone. "Because she's my girlfriend," I said angrily as my frustration grew to its boiling point. Both Dalton and Kimberly laughed at the notion. "Strange," Dalton started. "Most people can't resist the effects of the changes," he said, almost confused. "In any case," he continued. "Kimberly, I want you to hold on to this," Dalton said as he handed her a ring that was on his index finger before continuing. "Now, why don't you explain your relationship to Charlie here?" he said in a sinister tone before giving her a quick peck. Kimberly laughed. "Well, for starters, we never dated," Kimberly explained. My heart sank. I didn't understand what was going on and what Dalton had done. "That's not true," I blurted out. "We had our first date at the..." I paused for too long. My mind was foggy, vague memories were there. If I focused hard enough I could remember them, but why were they so hard to remember? "It was the bowling alley?" I said as I questioned the validity of my own answer. "Interesting," Dalton said. "It seems to work better the closer you are to the person holding it." He mumbled. Kimberly giggled. "That wasn't a date, silly," she explained as she leaned over Dalton and gave me a playful tap on the knee. "Dalton and I were just talking about this. We met in college and at first I thought you had a major crush on me." "If you can even believe that," she said as she laughed at the very idea of it. "But then it all made sense when I learned about your obsession with me," she said playfully. My face flushed with embarrassment. "Kimberly!" I shouted. "This is too weird. You need to stop so that we can figure out what's going on," I said as my memories of college began to get fuzzy. I could still vaguely remember how things were supposed to be, but they were shrouded in other memories. Memories of seeing Kimberly for the first time, needing to be in the same class as her and being overjoyed when she sat next to me. This made no sense, but it had to be linked to that ring in her hand. I tried to get up. "Kimberly, just give me the ring. We need to talk about this somewhere else," I said as I leaned over. "You Charlie, sit down," Kimberly said in disgust, and like that I found myself sitting back down, separated from her with Dalton sitting next to me. "This is what I'm talking about," Kimberly explained. "I thought it was just a little crush, but even after I told you I was dating Dalton Kimberly continued before I cut her off. "What?" I blurted out. "Kimberly, listen, you need to stop I tried to continue before Kimberly spoke again. "God, Charlie, would you just be quiet and let me talk?" Kimberly asked. I tried to interject, but I found myself unable to make a noise and unable to stand from my seat. Dalton gave me a wink as he smiled and watched me resign to my fate. "I appreciate our friendship, but you were always so possessive over me. It's like you wanted to do everything I did, and I'll admit it, I was pretty weirded out when I caught you going through my underwear," she said, much to my dismay. My eyes grew wide as I learned this new information and found my memories reflecting them. If I tried really hard I could faintly remember how that first study meeting we had in her apartment, how she invited me over and it was there that we shared our first kiss. But these memories were hard to gather. Instead, the memories that came racing were different and far more perverse. I remembered being obsessed with seeing Kimberly's home and practically begging her to let me come over. I remembered being overjoyed when I got to see her in my room, and in the moment she left for the washroom I saw the top drawer of her dresser open. A loose pink and frilly garment poked out the top and I just had to see it. I remember rushing over and removing the pink bikini-cut garment from the dresser and being absolutely amazed. I couldn't look away from it, and in this trance, I didn't even hear Kimberly return. I remember her shock as she called out my name in disgust and how awful I felt. I slumped in my seat. I didn't want to be in this club anymore and I wanted this nightmare to end. Kimberly took notice of my demeanor and quickly reassured me. "Hey now, it's okay," she said softly. "I'm sorry I brought it up like that, and while yes I did think you were some kind of pervert. It all made sense once Dalton cleared it up," she explained. I looked over at Dalton and furrowed my brow, but he only responded with a larger smile. "I understand now that you just wished you could be me, and that's okay to admit," she said as she gave me a cheerful smile, much to my dismay as my mind began to grow foggy. "Heck, you buying my underwear from me worked out super great because it helped me pay for all kinds of things," she said as though that was completely normal. My mind began to warp again. Memories of my true past were getting harder and harder to hang on to as these new memories created by this somehow magic ring altered my very past. Memories of me creeping through Kimberly's social media accounts and wishing I was the one taking those selfies were flooding my mind, taking the same classes as her so that I could feel more like her, and then suddenly my eyes grew wide as I felt a shift under my clothes. A sharp pain as a result of my underwear tightening around my waist going doing to my crotch and sliding between my ass crack. I hardly had time to focus on my changing underwear as I felt a new piece of fabric materialize around my chest. It pinched at the sides of my torso in an incredibly uncomfortable way and squeezed what little pecs I had together. I looked down in disbelief as I noticed two small mounds visible from my shirt, two mounds unmistakably created from a padded bra, and I knew it wasn't just any bra. This had to be one of Kimberly's, and the tightness around my crotch was from her panties. I felt disgusted for a moment. I had to get out of these undergarments that I remembered buying from her and excitedly wearing so that I could be more like her. I remembered my underwear drawer filled with frilly underwear that was far too small for my broad build, and I noticed that it wasn't just my past that was changing, but my personality was as well. I knew this was wrong and I should be disgusted, but I struggled to hide a smile as I looked away. I was overjoyed that I was getting to wear the same underwear Kimberly wore. Why was this happening, and how could I escape this nightmare? My face flushed with embarrassment as I looked away in an attempt to hide the joy on my face as I thought about the white bra and thong combo I had on with a pink lace trim. Oh, looks like you've got him all flustered," Dalton said mockingly as he chuckled. "Dalton, don't tease the poor boy, he's like a little sister to me," Kimberly said in my defense. Although unknowingly that just hurt more to hear. "Oh come on Kimberly, you know I'm just joking around and that we're all friends," Dalton said with a slight laugh. "In fact, I got you all here because I found a way to help him," Dalton said as his tone shifted to that of something much more sinister. Both Kimberly and I looked at him confused, but I still found myself unable to speak or get up. "What do you mean?" Kimberly asked for me. "You see," Dalton began. "I gave you a magic ring that can completely change anyone based on what you say," Dalton explained. Kimberly laughed. "Oh yeah? It hasn't done anything yet and I've been holding it this whole time," she stated. "Well, that's because you only repeated what you knew was the truth based on what we were talking about before Charlie got here. Try something else," Dalton said as he gave me a grin. Kimberly rolled her eyes. "Okay fine," she said. "Charlie, you have purple hair," she said and then gasped. I couldn't see my own hair, but based on events so far I concluded that it had in fact changed color. "Oh my gosh!" Kimberly exclaimed. "This is amazing, Dalton," she shouted with glee. "But why can you see it if I made the change?" "I know it is, and now using this you can help your old friend Charlie here." "I set up a precaution where the changes don't rewrite anything for me," Dalton said with a fake tone of joy. "Wait, you mean it can change him into a her and only the three of us will know?" Kimberly asked and Dalton nodded his head. I wanted to try and stop her, but I was still muffled and unable to move, and so I found myself trapped as she spoke. "This is incredible," Kimberly said excitedly. "Charlie, this will make you so happy." "You are an exact copy of me," she said, giddy with glee. At first, nothing happened, but after a moment I heard an audible pop come from my back, and immediately after that several more pops followed as I felt my bone structure repositioning itself. I could feel fat moving through my body as my body heated up and practically melted away any excess fat. It hurt like hell, but only for a few moments, and then it was done. I felt lighter, strands of short blonde hair were visible in my eyesight, and I looked down to see that my once well-fitting t-shirt was now incredibly loose on me, and the ill-fitting undergarments hugged my new assets well. I didn't have a mirror, but I knew I was an exact double of Kimberly based on her shocked expression. "Holy crap!" Kimberly shouted as Dalton stifled a laugh. "This is amazing," she exclaimed, and then looked at me. "Why isn't she speaking?" Kimberly asked Dalton. "Because you told her to be quiet earlier, babe," Dalton explained. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." Kimberly blurted out with a sincere look of apology on her face. "Charlie, you can now speak and tell me how happy you are about this ring and the changes we made thanks to it," she said happily. I finally felt my voice return. I started before clearing my throat. I wasn't used to hearing her soft, high-pitched voice come out of my mouth. "Kimberly," I tried again as I attempted to lower my register, but instead of sounding masculine as I had hoped, I just sounded silly, and it was ridiculous enough that it caused Kimberly to giggle. "This isn't right. The ring you have is wonderful," I started before realizing my words weren't coming out right. "It's made me incredibly happy, but it's not right, and we need to fix things," I said as I did my best to try and explain it. "Just let me have it and I'll show you," I said. Kimberly looked at me confused before going to hand me the ring. Just as it touched my fingertips, I felt Dalton's now much larger hand yank it away. "Hey!" I squeaked, not sounding nearly as angry as I wanted to. "Be quiet and keep your arms down," Dalton commanded as I felt my voice disappear. "How isn't this fully changing you?" he asked as he looked at me. "Dalton, what the heck?" Kimberly said angrily. "There's something strange here," Dalton muttered. "Kimberly, you can't trust Charlie with this ring, you said it yourself. She's like your little sister, and it wouldn't be responsible to let your little sister have that kind of power. Trust me, I always know what's best for you," he said almost angrily. Kimberly blinked. "You're right," she said, much to my dismay. I don't know what I was thinking, but clearly I know best, and who knows what she would do with that kind of power, she said in agreement. "Good girl," Dalton said. "We need to make sure Charlie never gets this ring," he said with a tone of importance as he handed it back to Kimberly. "Now it's a bit weird that there are two of you here. How about you fix that?" Dalton said as he relinquished the ring to Kimberly. "I've got just the idea," Kimberly said as she looked towards me. "Charlie, you are my," she paused for a moment as she thought, 21-year-old little sister. My eyes grew wide in disbelief. I felt another pop as my bones shifted again, but this time to a much lesser extent. I was shorter, but otherwise, I felt the same. It was hard to tell through my incredibly baggy clothes, but I didn't think I changed much physically. If anything, I probably looked like a 21-year-old version of Kimberly. "The resemblance is," Dalton commented as he looked at me and then Kimberly. "Maybe Charlie would do better as her own woman and not an exact copy," he suggested, and I prayed that without the power of the ring that Kimberly would disagree and change me back. But my prayers went unanswered. "I always did want a younger sister," Kimberly stated. "Your hair reaches your mid-back," Kimberly stated, and suddenly I felt my scalp burn as newfound soft blonde hair trickled down my shoulders towards my mid-back. I never liked the struggle of having long hair, but I did like playing with it. "Now I can play with yours," she said excitedly, like I was some kind of toy. "You do look a bit too much like my exact double though," What if Charlie was more of a girly girl who spent her time shopping instead of at the gym like I do? She pondered as I suddenly felt what little strength I had from Kimberly's body vanish with a thin layer of fat covering my body. I wasn't overweight by any means, but I wasn't in amazing shape. Let's also style that hair into a high ponytail, she said as I suddenly felt my hair get pulled up and a band materialized around it. Subtle but sexy makeup as well, she added as I felt a layer of something appear on my face. And girl, we need to get you into something tighter and sexier, she said full of amusement. I suddenly felt a breeze hit my legs. I looked down in and to my shock realized that my pants were not only rising up my legs but also merging into one whole. My t-shirt merged with my newfound skirt and the whole ensemble changed to a dark purple. The bottoms continued to rise until they reached the upper portion of my now hairless and plump thighs. My top suddenly plunged deeply into my newfound cleavage. I was unaccustomed to seeing mounds of flesh as I looked down. I was glad I took after Kimberly and that they weren't any larger. My sleeves vanished and so did the back of my top. Instead, my top was now tied around my neck, leaving my back exposed. Lastly were my shoes, my poor running shoes. They stiffened and turned to a glossy purple shade like my dress. The laces vanished and so too did the tongue. Next was the heel. I'm not sure how high it was, but the point rose out of the shoe much higher than I would like. My socks began to vanish but stopped just as they became a nearly transparent beige. From there they began to climb up my legs, and as they hugged my much rounder calves and thighs, I still found myself unable to convey any words to Kimberly and instead tried to express myself through nonverbal means. This did not work. Damn girl! Kimberly cheered as she admired me. I think she's just about ready to be let loose, she said as she continued to look me up and down. Almost ready, Dalton interjected. I still see too much of you in her. You want her to be her own person, don't you? Dalton asked as he gave me a disgusting wink. I think physically, you're almost there. But also, remember that the poor dear was raised a man and so, mentally she'll need some help, he continued as he rubbed Kimberly's thigh. You're right, Kimberly said as she bit her lip. She's a girly girl, so, some jewelry would help, she said musing. Oh! And a cute mani-pedi, Charlie needs those regularly. I suddenly felt a sharp sting in my earlobes. I shook my head instinctively and felt a sizable hoop on either side of my head tap against my neck. The next sting was above my navel. I couldn't see it, but it didn't take an expert to deduce that I now had a piercing there. The rest of the jewelry was, thankfully, less painful. Golden bracelets dangled from my wrists, a dainty ring appeared on each hand and a pearl necklace dangled just above my breasts. My hands then shifted. I noticed as my nails grew slightly and became more shapely, they were coated in a light pink, and I could imagine something similar happen to my feet. I think that about does it, Kimberly said, satisfied. Are you sure? Dalton asked. I'm not sure what else she could want, Kimberly replied. Jokingly, Dalton held his hands a good foot away from his chest as he pretended to grope large breasts. Dalton! Kimberly squealed. You're so bad, she said as she giggled. I'm just saying, from the point of view of a guy, Charlie is very pretty right now, Dalton explained, causing me to feel disgust at being seen as pretty. But why not make her an absolute knockout with the guys? If this is what she's always wanted, then surely she would want to go big or go home, he said teasingly. Kimberly rolled her eyes. Sorry, hun, she said as she looked at me. Dalton has got a point, and your big boobs are really going to help you feel like a woman, she said, much to my shock. I felt my chest expand and strain against my dress. By the time it was done, I could hardly see anything past the mountain of cleavage, and I wasn't so sure that I could jokingly hold my hands a foot away from my chest without actually touching my breasts. Now she's perfect, Dalton said as he put emphasis on the word she. Great! I should probably get her moving, I can't wait. Kimberly said before Dalton interjected. Hold on there, he said abruptly and then tapped on his head. Oh right, Kimberly giggled. Charlie, your mind will match your body. You'll think like a young stereotypical sorority girl. Nothing is too girly for you, she said quite proud. Dalton then whispered something to her and she continued. Oh. Also, you love to dance, flaunt your body and meet cute boys who you are very attracted to, she said giggling. I felt a shiver run down my spine, something shifted in my head but it was hard to tell what. Surely this ring couldn't change me on such a fundamental level? I had always been a girl. Wait, that isn't right. I was a woman through and through. A woman. Try as I might, I couldn't think of myself any other way. Stuck in my head, I had not even realized that my posture had changed. My supple legs were crossed at the thigh and my back arched out more to put emphasis on my chest. Now, let's let the world meet Charlie, Dalton said excitedly. Okay. Kimberly agreed in her drunken stupor. Charlie, you can now speak and move again, she said gleefully. Finally, I could explain myself and hopefully fix this. I wanted to be mad, I was mad, but I didn't come across quite as fierce as I wanted to. Kimmy! I whined as I sounded more like a frustrated child than anything else. You, totally didn't listen to me when I was trying to tell you what was going on and stuff, I said frustratedly as I threw my arms up. I was not ready for the sensation of my large breasts bouncing wildly as I did. Charlie, you're being very rude considering everything we did for you, Dalton said in an authoritarian tone of voice. Yeah, Charlie, this is not cool, Kimberly said agreeing. Kimmy, I pleaded as tears formed in my eyes. You're my big sister, I said and then groaned. I mean, I'm your little sister, I said as I tried again only to fail. My heart was shattering. Just give me the ring and I can make things better, I said as my voice began to crack. Oh honey, Kimberly said empathetically, you know I can't trust you with this ring, you aren't mature enough. Just tell me what's wrong? Kimberly asked. I can fix it with this ring, she said as she held up the ring. I think I know what to do, Dalton said as he grabbed the ring from Kimberly. Both of you sit down and shut up, we both complied against our wills. Charlie, you've always been boy crazy and jealous of what I have with Kimberly. You're going to go dancing tonight and unless you want me to get Kimberly to make more extreme changes to you, you'll be going home with a guy. Kimberly, you're going to remember nothing about this ring. You came out to support your sister and help her find a good man. You're going to be a firm big sister and you know this is what Charlie needs, Dalton said frustrated. You can both move and talk again, he added. Obviously we can, Kimberly said. Kimmy! I exclaimed. We need to dash. I wanted to tell her to get the ring or to get out of here, but my mind fought against me. I remembered everything and I knew that what was implanted in me was wrong. I could fight it better than what Kimberly did to me, but it still had a hold on me. We need to go home, I managed to say. Oh no we don't, Missy, Kimberly said firmly. You are going to go out there and find yourself a man, you can't be single forever, she said as she gave me a playful shove. I began to grow frustrated with the situation. If I didn't play along I risked more changes, but if I could get away I could maybe figure things out and undo this somehow. I let out a defeated sigh. I didn't want to leave Kimberly with this creep, but I might not have a choice. I slid myself up out of my seat, carefully keeping my legs close together so as to not accidentally flash anyone, and got up. I wobbled slightly in my heels. It was my first time ever wearing them and yet it only took a moment to compose myself. Memories came in of wearing them my whole life, of wanting to emulate my older sister and be more feminine than she was. I shook my head as I tried to keep everything straight. I'm going to get something to drink, I squeaked out in my new high-pitched voice. It was a lie. I was going to get out of here, hopefully unnoticed, and somehow get help. Though, truthfully, I wasn't sure how I would get help. I couldn't really go to a police officer right now and try to convince him that I was actually nearly 10 years older and that my sister was actually my girlfriend. Maybe I could search online and find some kind of magical police or some information on Dalton's ring if I could get to a computer. Walking was odd. We rarely think about walking and instead just do it. However, at this moment, I was very conscious about the way I was walking, the way I swayed my hips with every step in an almost exaggerated way, the way my hands swung limply at my wrists as I walked, and how I pulled my shoulders back. It was hard to remember walking any other way, and try as I might, I found myself stuck like this. I was closing in on the exit and found myself stuck in place. The music had changed and something about this heavy beating rhythmic song spoke to me. I knew I wasn't a fan of this kind of music, but this was speaking to me and I didn't want to leave. At least not while this song was playing. I stood there trying to fight this new impulse. My hips wiggled slightly to the beat and I found myself wanting to dance. I had never wanted to dance before, and yet I found myself at odds with my body as I tried to suppress the urge. My thought process was suddenly interrupted by a voice from behind. "Damn girl, did you want some fries with that shake?" a masculine voice from behind asked. I snapped out of my mind, and in shock I slowly turned to face this voice. I was ready to tell him off, but as I faced him I felt my emotions change. He was tall. I wasn't sure how short I was now, but this man stood at least a foot above me. He was muscular, shaved head and a thick beard. His pink button-up shirt and white pants clung tightly to him, and I found my mind wandering to what he might look under them. I shook my head again as I tried to keep my mind straight and giggled. It wasn't a voluntary giggle, but rather something my body did on its own. "Sorry," I said after I giggled. "I'm just, getting ready to go," I said as I grinned stupidly and involuntarily at the man. "Oh, that's too bad," the man said, seeming genuinely disappointed. "You looked cute with your little wiggles here," he said genuinely as he gave me a smile. My heart exploded as I heard the man call me cute. I knew I shouldn't feel this way, but I felt a warmth building up inside of me and I couldn't control my smile. I mean, this guy was hotter than Dalton, and I'm sure Kimmy would be envious to see me with him. Again, the thoughts began to creep in and I knew I couldn't stay longer. "Ah," I said kindly as my body acted involuntarily and squeezed my breasts between my arms. "You're so sweet," I cooed. "Listen," I said as I took a step closer to him and tried to convey that I needed to go. "You're, super hot and stuff, but, I said, sounding very much so like a ditzy girl. I struggled to express myself properly. I wanted to tell him that I had to go, but I couldn't seem to bring myself to tell him that. Behind him, I could see Dalton making out with Kimberly, and I felt anger in me. Ugh. I grunted in a cute high-pitched huff as I stamped my foot on the ground, causing my cheek to jiggle wildly. I felt tears form in my eyes and could only imagine how insane this all looked. "Hey now," the man said as he placed a hand on my arm. "Is everything okay?" he asked sincerely. "No," I replied honestly as I fought my tears. "I'm just, having a really hard time tonight. My sister is here with a guy and she shouldn't be with him, and I'm supposed to be smart and stuff," I said as I struggled to keep things together. The man looked at me in the eyes with a tint of worry. "It's okay," he said softly. "So you got in a fight with your sister and she's with a douche. Why don't we just dance and forget about this?" he said as he brought his hand down my arm and took my much smaller and held it. I took a deep breath. Maybe he was right, maybe I should do this. He seemed nice and I did need to get my mind off of things. Plus, my song was playing and I really wanted to dance. Kimmy also would be super happy to see me with such a beefcake. She was mad at me earlier because I didn't want to find a man. I could figure this ring thing out later. "Sure," I said as I smiled. "I'd like that," I said as we began to walk toward the dance floor. "I'm Terry," the man said. And you are? He asked. Charlie, I responded softly. It's my pleasure to meet you, Charlie, Terry said. Now, Charlie, let's see what moves you've got, he said as he began to dance. It was hard to resist the music and even harder to resist Terry. Pretty quickly I found myself dancing with my back facing him, my hips gyrated against his crotch and I could feel him getting harder. I was happy. I had forgotten why I was even upset, and then I saw Kimberly still making out with Dalton. It came back to me. I needed to get out of here. It was getting harder and harder to keep my head on, and Terry might be my way out. If Dalton saw me leaving with a man, I might spare Kimberly or myself of any other changes. I leaned my head back into Terry's chest. Let's, get out of here, I said to Terry, trying my best to remember what was going on. Oh, Terry said, intrigued. I like the way you think. It's nice to see you happy again, he said as he wrapped his arms around me and hugged me closer to his bulge. Should we tell your sister that you're heading out? He asked. I wasn't sure, but I probably should. It was possible that maybe Kimberly could remember things like I could and that she was trapped in her mind. Maybe I could give her a sign that I would solve this. Good idea, I said as I pulled myself out of his hug and strutted my way toward Kimberly. Kimmy! I shouted excitedly as I got closer to them. She looked at me and smiled approvingly at Terry, who was standing behind me. I think I'm, going to be heading out and, I'm going to sort stuff out, okay? I asked, trying my best to convey information to her. I'm really happy for you, Charlie. He looks like quite the catch, Kimberly said supportively. Just make sure you're safe and fun, she added and gave me a wink. My heart began to race as I thought of the implications. I had to keep strong and remember what I was here for. Oh, Charlie always has fun. She loves to please, Dalton said teasingly. A tingle ran down my spine. I managed to leave with Terry, and once out the door, finally outside again, I was ready to bid him farewell. Except, I realized my car was no longer outside, and in fact, I wasn't even sure if I had a car to drive in or an apartment to go home to. All good, babe? Terry asked. I figured we could head back to my place, he said. I giggled. Sure, that sounds great, I said without even realizing it. I was glad to follow his lead. I could help Terry out with his needs before I dealt with my problems. He was cute and I could really use some comfort after today. Not to mention, Kimmy will finally get off my back about being single. I followed Terry to his and couldn't help but feel my heart race in excitement. I just hoped this wasn't a one-night stand.